Yes.
Hi, welcome to the Key Team. It is Tuesday, and it's been a few weeks since we were able to come on for one reason or another. But we are excited to have Miss Emily Blizzard. She is an insurance agent with American Family Agency, and of course we have Kayla McDonald from Remax Alliance, and I'm Lindsay with Keystone Mortgage. So welcome, Miss Emily. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you.
Emily came to my office, yes, last week or the week before. My weeks run into each other with everything going on, but she has a plethora of information and has, I don't know, like speaking to you, like, and all the information that you had and your excitement about what you do was very interesting to me, and that's why I wanted you to come on and talk and give us some more info. So I'm really excited to have you. So thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
So if you
I
want to just
think.
introduce,
Go ahead.
so I was just going to say, do you want to introduce yourself, kind of give us a little like rundown of who you are, what you do, how you got started, all that, and then we can kind of just like shoot questions at you.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously I'm Emily. I opened American Family Agency about a year ago and a couple months. So I've actually been in the insurance industry for about almost 7 years. I came to Florida. I moved to Florida from Alabama about 6 years ago, and I was working for a whole nother company. When I decided to make a career change because I needed something a little closer to home. And that's when I found an insurance agency to start working for. So I, worked for that agency for a little bit, worked for another agency for a few years, and then I decided I want to start my own agency. It didn't really come to that like that. My husband
He
kind of told
totally pushed
me, no.
you.
Yeah, my husband was like, "Why don't you start your own agency?" And I'm like, I could. um, so that's kind of how I started. American Family Agency is actually a brand. It's kind of like a franchise. It's actually the first captive independent agency. So I'm my own agency owner with that brand. But I specialize in the home, auto, and business insurance. Um, and yeah, I service everywhere in the state of Florida. Hoping to get my license in several other states. So that's in the works right now.
Cool. So insurance world is really fun for you right now.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think like the whole real estate industry, is fun for
Yeah.
everybody right now, just because we are all intertwined with one another.
Hmm.
I know that the homeowners insurance right now, that this market is just
Bananas.
bonkers. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, bonkers, bananas, all of the crazy terms. So I know that there was like a thing with Citizens that just happened, like with a letter that was sent out about what they were going to like sell their coverage or something. You know what I'm talking about? They sent out
Yes.
a letter, and what was that letter about? And why do you think that happened?
So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of big changes coming up, especially in Citizens. So I was telling Lindsay the other day that Citizens, they've always gone through a depopulation process with a lot of their policies because they have such an influx of policies, especially within the last few years, with all of the carriers going insolvent or leaving the state of Florida. So basically, Citizens takes in all these policies, and in order for them to be able to have enough money to pay their claims and not put an assessment on their policyholders, so to speak, what they do is they run through a depopulation process, and there's two parts to that. So one part of that is Citizen says, hey, here's an offer from another private market insurance company who is offering you, X amount for your, or is going to take over your policy for X amount of dollars. And they give them an option. The other part is they don't give them an option. And the stipulation there is if they are able to find a private market carrier that will, offer them 20% less of that premium, then they say, okay, you're going to this company. You can't come back for, X amount of years or what have you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's definitely been a process. I've had clients that I wrote there just a couple of months ago and they're already being taken out, and Citizens like, nope, can't come back. So
Gosh.
yeah, I'm trying to steer my clients away from Citizens as much as possible. Just because I don't want them to have to go through that. And, Citizens also doesn't cover a lot of things that other private market carriers do.
Yeah.
So it's a big change right now.
Yeah, and it's crazy though, and that's, I'm sure that's tough because like Citizens is always the cheapest. They're always like a fraction, I feel
Yeah.
like, of so that's hard. That's like a couple $100 a month, difference in somebody's payments. So I mean that's a tough sell, and that's what I tell people too. But I guess it just depends on the house, I think, and where you're living, what type of coverage you really want.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, I like my house just flooded during the storm, so
no.
So insurance, I'm learning so much every single day, about what insurance, and which is great because it helps me talk to my customers who are going to be on waterfront. Rethink your policy and your coverage. If you're in a flood zone, maybe you might want to make sure you have extra coverage and have contents coverage and all of this stuff. So it's like, I think that's kind of what people need to think about when they're choosing their coverage and their policies and
Absolutely.
whatnot. It all makes a difference. So,
absolutely.
Have you ever heard of, this is a really weird scenario, and I'm just going to use my scenario because this is the first time I've ever heard of this happening. Have you ever heard of like an insurance agency or a mortgage company, like just somehow reducing somebody's coverage, like their policy, like with just about the person knowing?
Without the person knowing,
Yeah.
no, that would be illegal. So any policy changes that are ever made by an insurance agent, you have to get consent from the insured first.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, insurance companies can make changes to your policy, if they have implemented a new guideline or something like that.
Sure.
They'll make changes and they'll send out a letter and let you know, like, hey, these changes are being made. Contact your agent if you have any questions.
Right. Yeah. So that's basically the consensus that I have and what I've been told by everybody. So in my scenario, we had like 145,000 in coverage in like 2020, and then somehow our coverage got reduced for a flood to $60,000. And we had no idea. We didn't know, until we had to use it. The mortgage company and the insurance companies are pointing fingers at each other because they're like, well, we didn't do this. Your mortgage company does it. And then like my mortgage company was like, well, we didn't do it. So we're like,
Oh, there she is. She's back.
so,
She's back. You flipped out for a minute.
Yeah, I saw it flipped out, but yeah. So basically, they're pointing fingers at each other right now.
So that was your flood insurance company?
Yes.
So the only thing that comes to mind, because I have seen that happen before, where they will reduce the coverage, is if they were requesting a document from either you or the agent that maybe they didn't receive. Like I've had policies in the past where they require extra photos showing the venting along the house to make sure it's vented properly. And if they don't receive that, then they're going to reduce the coverage drastically.
Wow.
So it could have been a scenario like that. But typically, I mean, like I said, they'll send out letters, letting you know, like, what's being requested and things like that. But typically your agent should, I mean, obviously they should inform you of that so they can make sure your coverage is back up to where it needs to be. That is an interesting scenario, though.
Right. Well, because like an increase was actually requested, and they had that documented, and they said something about like we requested an increase, I think in 2021 or something. I don't know. And then it obviously never happened. But
wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's yeah, I mean, I would definitely be talking to your agent and asking them, what happened, what transpired here, why did we originally have this coverage and now we don't? Because, I mean, if you have the application signed showing this is the coverage that you had, they should have some sort of documentation that shows when your coverage was reduced and why it was reduced.
Yeah, if they don't have any, they show that the documentation of the increase or the increased request, but it was just never done. So I don't really know what happened. And the agent was saying something like they sent out some letters or something. So maybe they were requesting something, but we don't know because nobody called us. And I don't know where the letters were sent. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a rough situation.
It's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Insurance.
Yeah, it's all a learning experience though. So it's like kind of one of those things that, I'm sure you probably tell your clients this too, like here in Florida, before storm season, you should just, get your policy out and just review it to make sure that stand. Phone call. Sorry. You understand what your coverage is, and just different ways to prep for a potential storm or storm season, whether you're in a flood zone or just in Florida in general, because you could get a bad storm and something could rip some shingles off, or like to tornadoes that happened. So did you get a lot of calls from people right after those tornadoes that just like randomly came through a couple weeks? What was it, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, it was a few weeks ago. I remember I was laying in bed and all of a sudden I wake up in the middle of the night and there's like all these sounds going off for these tornadoes, and I'm like, I didn't know we were expecting any tornadoes. But no, surprisingly, I didn't get any calls from anybody about damage. Surprisingly enough, and typically, with big storms, at least hurricanes, insurance companies will shut down before a hurricane comes because they don't want to be writing any new business, making any changes, things like that. So with a tornado, it's a bit more sporadic. You don't really know when the tornadoes are going to hit. But no, I mean, no calls for damage or anything like that, which I thought was pretty surprising. I was expecting a lot of calls. But again, it's one of those things. I mean, as long as somebody has wind coverage, hopefully they have wind coverage. Something like that would be covered.
Yeah, it's the insurance world is very crazy. Like some people have said that they're not in a flood zone and they do carry flood insurance because just in case some type of house, like for like a pipe leak or something. Is that something that people should be carrying, or like if you have some sort of like just flooding that happens that's non-storm related in your home, does flood insurance cover that, or is that something that would be covered under your regular homeowners?
Yeah, that's like a great question.
Left the sink on type of thing.
Yeah,
I've never had that happen.
There's water damage and then there's flood coverage. So flood coverage is specifically excluded from all insurance policies unless you add it. So water damage is for things like if a pipe burst in your house or the sink overflowed, water heater leaks, something like that, something to that extent. Flood damage is a storm surge, rising waters from the outside. And typically you can, you're going to know if you flooded because you're not going to be the only one that flooded. Your neighbors around you are probably going to flood as well.
Right.
So the flood coverage, I always recommend because we do live in the state of Florida. And I try to tell all of my clients like, hey, we live in the state of Florida. Would you like a quote for flood insurance? Typically if you're not in a flood zone, it's under $500 for the year, depending on, but, if you are in a flood zone, it's a bit more pricey. But the water damage coverage also very important to have, because water damage are among the highest of the claims in Florida. There's, all kinds of things that can arise from water. So water damage is very important to have as well. And a lot of carriers will limit water damage coverage to a certain amount based on the year your home is built. So it's important to find, carriers that will offer full water damage coverage versus carriers that will offer limited water damage coverage. And there's a big stipulation between the two. So.
Okay. Let's see. What about people who have pools in their backyard? Like, do you see people have pools and they have all the proper like gates and locks and everything? Is that does the insurance cost usually go up for that?
So, it doesn't go up necessarily because you have a pool because of the risk. But it does go up because you have to increase your coverage. So, let's say for instance, somebody just built a pool on their house. Well, now that's probably an additional $60,000 that you have to add to your coverage for your home policy. And then if you have a screen enclosure around it, which most of the people in Florida do, that's an additional $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 that you want to add on top of that. Right. Along with carriers, they won't accept an insurance policy if you have a pool, but you have no screening or you have no fence. So you can have, either a fence or a screen, but you have to have one of the two. Right. Because, obviously the security risk, drowning, things like that. So they definitely make sure to look for, if you have a screen enclosure, if the pool is fenced, if there's, how much coverage to add and things like that. So it will go up in terms of coverage, but just for having a pool, it won't, it doesn't necessarily go up like that.
Okay. So it's just because it's basically another structure, you want to make sure that you have that coverage in case there's some sort of, I don't know, damage or pool leak or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. We're also putting a pool in, so that'll be something. I mean, we I think probably should redo our entire policy anyway, because we clearly have some issues, but that'll be good to know once it's all, completed.
Absolutely. Yes.
So with all the changes that are coming up with Citizens, one of the things that I think is fantastic is the pool of other policies that you have the ability to look into. It almost felt like endless. So I felt like you had a lot of options for people in different circumstances. And, if they do receive that letter from Citizens, where do they go? And I felt like when you and I were speaking that you had, a game plan for the amount of companies that you had to select from that would be helpful to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have about 100 plus different carriers for home, auto, and business insurance. So when people receive that letter from Citizens, the first thing they do is they call their agent, like, what is this? Why am I being kicked out of Citizens? I just got with them, or, whatever the situation is. So they first have to register their choice. If they're given an option, they have to register their choice by a certain date. And typically from what I've seen so far, the premiums and the carriers are competitive to what they're already paying with Citizens. It's not a drastic increase. Of course, I say drastic to me, that looks a little bit different than to the average consumer. But it's not, skyrocketing. So what I'll tell people is, I can always reshop you through all of my other carriers. If I have an option, obviously I'm going to show you what that would look like. But typically they won't have to pay any additional premium when they get moved over to the new carrier until the renewal time. So like one of these letters might look like, this is what you're currently paying with Citizens, and this is what the new company may offer you, an estimated renewal price. And then they'll also show you what your renewal would look like with Citizens. So it definitely kind of lets you weigh your options and see what's going to be best for you and what's going to be best for your coverage and things like that. And again, these private market carriers also offer a lot more coverage. So they lay that out as well. Like, this is what you can be covered for. This is what you are covered for. But yeah, I mean, I typically try to reshop people regardless of that, if that happens, just so they can have more options.
Right.
It's always good to give people options too. And I think that, a lot of people, when they're looking at, first of all, a lot of people are just getting their coverage, because they're buying a new house.
Yeah.
Or like you said, you have people that are reshopping because of one reason or the other. They're either rates, they were dropped because the insurance company is leaving Florida, or I don't know, their policy doubled or tripled all of a sudden. So now they're like, holy crap, I need to look for something else. When it comes to when you're buying a house, it's overwhelming. You're looking at all these things literally in like a 30-day period. And then now you're looking at this additional cost. You have these couple different policies. And, for me, any type of insurance, I'm like, I go across. I'm like, okay, what's happening here? What is all this? What does this mean when it says, I don't know, let's just say like dwelling, contents, like what are all that cover? So like, it's good and it's hard to, I feel like, to find somebody who's going to really and thoroughly explain all of that and what's going to be as a consumer, my best benefit or my best interest, that's one, going to be cost effective, and two, in the event that I ever need to use it, it's actually going to be useful to me, because you just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whenever somebody, especially like a first-time home buyer, I try to, obviously I'm going to give them options of, insurance, probably 2 or 3 different, but I try to get a hold of them and say, okay, we need to run through your coverages. That way, you know what you're buying, what you're going to be covered for, and things like that. Because I mean, 9 times out of 10, I talk to first-time home buyers and they have no idea what insurance means, what it's covered, or what covers, things like that. So I think it's really important for the average consumer to know what you're buying, especially because most of the time when somebody's buying an insurance policy, they don't think they're ever going to have to use it. Right.
Right.
That's what it's for. Insurance policies are there to be used if you need them. Especially for catastrophic events. So it's definitely important to, sit down and go through the dwelling, the other structures, the contents, flood coverage, water damage, things like that.
Right. Yeah, because I think that, a lot of people don't understand. You probably have seen and heard all the horror stories. It could happen to anybody. Like your water heater could, burst or overflow, or a pipe can burst somewhere, and you're not home. Like, what if you're out of town, and then you come home, and it's been 3 days, and all this water's like completely flooded your house. Like, it's just been running water for days, and that seeps into everything. So I feel like one, we're in Florida, and two, just like that could happen anywhere, and you want to make sure you have the coverage. What if you only have $10,000 in water damage, or what is it? Just water coverage? Is that what they call it?
Water damage coverage, yeah.
Water damage coverage. Like $10,000 is not going to cover very much.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, you wouldn't believe the amount of stories that I've heard, because people just go out of town and they leave their water on and they come back and their entire house is flooded. I've heard that story several times. Yeah. 2 things that I like to tell people when it comes to that is, 1, before you're leaving to go out of town, always shut your water off. You never know what can happen. Right. But 2, they make this this app now, I guess. It's a device. It's called the Smart Home Water Protection Service. And it's basically, you can order it on Amazon for like $200, but they send you these little sensors that you stick all around your house, and it connects to your phone, and it will let you know if you have any type of water leak. And if you don't respond within a certain amount of time, they'll send restoration companies out to your house and, basically dry it out, get it under control, and things like that. So I've been kind of pushing that for clients as well.
That's cool.
That's pretty
You should,
interesting.
yeah, you should put that, send us a link to that so we can, at least put it in the comments. And I mean, that's a, $200 is a small price to pay for something like that, especially if you're somebody who travels a lot for vacation or for work or whatever.
Yes.
That time away from
Sports.
home.
I feel like we're traveling all the time.
Yeah.
Or you're like gone for sports like every weekend.
Yeah.
That's huge, because if you can avoid having all that damage into your home, because I mean there's a lot more that goes into it. You're displaced from your home. You might not be able to live there.
Yeah.
During all the construction and restoration, depending on how severe it is. If it's just like a bathroom, that's fine.
Yeah.
But so many other added costs that come to, any type of, like, what if you have a fire? Like, I know somebody who had a fire in her house that was caused just by a wire. And then the smoke damage, like, they were out of their house, I think, for over a year, until they could get everything repaired. They lost, animals in that, so it's like things, there's just so much else that comes to it. And,
Yeah.
you hope something like that, like if fire while you're sleeping or whatever, you wake up in time to get out. Of course, our lives and of us and our pets and our animals, those can't be replaced, and everything else can. So it's, when it comes to insurance, it's a small price to pay to have that coverage that you need in the event that you need it, and hopefully you never do. But you just got to have the things in place of your house, like I'm sure like smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors are also a big thing that companies want in the event that something does happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's just better to have for peace of mind. Like you said, it's a small price to pay for that peace of mind. And, definitely reviewing the coverages on your policy. Because like you said, what if somebody has a house fire and they're misplaced from their house for a year? Loss of use coverage on a homeowner's policy would help you to, live somewhere else, stay somewhere else while your house is being repaired. And that comes standard on every homeowner's policy. It just kind of depends on how much coverage you want for that. Companies give you options of how much coverage that you can have for that coverage. But yeah, it's definitely important to review those and make sure that you have all the right coverages in place, because, you never know what can happen. Anything can happen.
Literally anything could happen for no reason at all.
Yeah.
Fault to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Just like cars, if you insure, did you say you do auto as well?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So it's just like a car accident. Nobody's planning to get into a car accident, but it happens.
Exactly.
But we have insurance, so if it does happen, if somebody does hit you, or a dog runs out in the middle of the road, or a deer or something, you swerve,
Yeah.
hit. That's why they're called,
Pushing 2 months. My daughter was had a accident, and 2 months, and we're still not through it.
Oh, wow.
It's a very long process.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even through our insurance. It was somebody else's. It wasn't her fault. So.
Yeah, that's exactly what they are, accidents, that you're never expected to have one. I mean, you wouldn't imagine the amount of calls that I get of people saying, oh, I'm not planning on getting into a car accident. I don't need it covered. Nobody's planning on it, but it happens.
Let's do this today.
Yeah.
I could never not have car insurance. Like right now, I don't have a car payment or anything, but like I could never not have it, because I just, unfortunately, any accident I've been in, it's always been my fault. So, not saying I'm a bad driver, but I'm not the greatest.
Yeah.
I don't I never planned on any of them. I didn't want it. It just
Yeah.
it happened. But
Yeah.
I have to always have car insurance. Always.
Yeah. Yeah. And car insurance in Florida is required by the state of law, but it just depends on the type of coverage, if you pay your car off and all of that good stuff. But definitely recommended in Florida, because they're, 1 in 4 drivers in Florida is uninsured. So it's definitely good to have it.
Yeah.
That's
I'm never
crazy to
canceled
me.
ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't trust myself, so. And I also don't like to break the law either. So there's that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel like we could sit here and talk for a long time about stories and insurance and everything, but I think that we are coming up to the end of our time. So if anybody needs a quote, or whether it's for insurance for their business, their car, their house, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I can post my email and phone number in the comments, but my office number is 813-771-5959. My email is a little bit longer, so I'll list that in the comments. But email, call, that's the best way to get a hold of me. You can also text my office line. And yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much. And like I said before, I'm excited to send some clients your way to see what we can do, how we can help them. So really appreciate your help and your time.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Bye, guys. Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye. You too.
I just texted Jess. There we go.